morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Welcome back to Red Hot Talk episode 113. Big numbers coming up. We are getting old every episode. If you're watching, not listening, you see our beard getting whiter and whiter. Oh dear.
I
Right.
think I think there must be a filter for that.
Yeah, I'm trying to find out where my brand new YOLO cam thing would that have some sort of like beauty
Your
filter.
beauty filter.
I
Yeah,
actually think
yeah.
that it has somewhere. Maybe I'll activate it at some point,
Okay,
and then
let's see
make me
that.
look a little bit slimmer. My beard gone back to black, and then
Yeah.
yeah, wrinkles are all gone. You know, like gonna look about 10 years younger. Right. As you can all see, today's topic, we're going to talk a little bit about sensors. We have a thing or two to say about it. We also got some data to show you guys, although Rod and I just had a look at those datas, and we will say that for full disclosure, this is coming from a website called, is it Photons for Photos? Photon to
Pho-
Photos.
Photons to photos.
Yes. So this website basically they analyze. It looks like some sort of electrical engineers like just having some fun looking at datas and numbers for
Yeah.
different sensors, and compile a massive chart from different cameras, different formats, and everything into just one single chart. They split into multiple different things as well, but the one that we want to focus on is dynamic range. I'm not
Yeah.
sure we're going to show you the noise one, because the noise one is very confusing, to say the least.
Well, I've looked at this, and I think they're attempting to measure two different types of noise
Yeah,
rather than combining the data into a single noise chart. And also the data's going up when I thought it might go down on the chart.
yeah,
So it's all a bit. Just for context, I did spend many years as a lab tester. So
right.
I do know how these things are tested. We didn't use the system this site is using. We used a different one. But every system has its pros and cons.
Yeah, it
My
certainly
understanding
has.
is that my understanding is that photons to photos uses can somehow analyze raw data directly before it's even been processed and demosaicked,
Yeah,
and can use that data to compare to measure noise, the variation between pixel values, that kind of thing, and the overall brightness range that the sensor can capture. I don't know how it does that. I presume it's a solid, sound, scientific method, but it's not
yeah.
quite the same as what other companies or other sites would use.
So if what you said is how it's been represented in these charts, and it's interesting because these are the raw data that we're looking at. And if it's before any processing, that it actually shows the generational advancements of these sensors over the years. And I think this is something that we want to talk about and have a look at, and especially a lot of people always say, like, oh, we get a sensor in 2026, and how does it compare to the one in 2012,
Yeah,
or maybe even older? Maybe even across different formats, an APS-C or full frame or medium format, because this chart does have all those sensors out there, including some iPhones, like, so these are tiny
yeah,
sensors.
yeah,
So it's interesting just to have a look at them, and at the same time want to talk a little bit about how modern digital processing has an effect on the final outcome of our photographs, because a lot of them are now done by software. We all know that now, and how much of it is down to software, and I think this chart is going to tell us something. But at the same time, I think if any of you have any idea about these sort of charts, of you where to come across this particular website, have I would like to hear from you guys as well, then, to see whether you have any particular understanding about these stuff, because it will be quite interesting to talk about that as well. But overall, and let's dive in and let's see how you react to these data, and maybe we can have a go and chat about all of this stuff. So I'm gonna share the screen now just to see the first one that we're going to look at. So okay, so this is the chart that we can see right now, and from that website, Photons to Photos. This is a chart for dynamic range versus the ISO setting. Okay. Just let me just clear some of the windows I have so I can start navigating a little bit of that. So what you're seeing right now is the OM system cameras. So let me just move it over. Right. Okay. I've got clear screen now. I can use it. Right. So very straightforward. If you look at it, the lower the ISO, the higher the dynamic range, which is a very standard practice. And no matter which camera you look at, which format you look at, it's always going to behave very similarly. The higher the ISO, the less the dynamic range. So now let's focus on just Michael for the time being, and that's how we're going to start this conversation before we jump into comparing to other format. So this is the latest and the greatest from OM system, OM Mark II, which is very similar. If I click on the OM3, as you would expect, very similar results, and there's no difference whatsoever in terms of behavior. Now, I'm going to jump all the way back to the oldest one that this chart has, which is the EM1 Mark 1. So if I click on it and see what happens. So what do you think, Rod?
It's not a massive difference. We're looking at. I need to see a larger version. Let me go to that same one. Looks like less than half a stop to me.
Yeah, it's not a great deal, isn't it?
No. But don't forget the EM1 Mark 1 was 16 megapixels, not 20.
Yep.
So that would help it very slightly. But it seems to me that differences like these aren't particularly significant. I think the only thing you can say is that of all the advances that have been made in sensors over the past few years, dynamic range isn't really one of them.
No.
That kind of hit its peak maybe as long ago as 10 years ago and hasn't really improved since then.
So if I just click up I'm just going to focus on two cameras at a time. Otherwise, there'll be too many lines to start to going to be confusing. But if you're just looking at some of the dots here, obviously that we all know that if you're home system or Olympus users, our base ISO starts at 200, not 100 or 50. These are pull. So they are digital pools, so they're not actually the base native ISO, base ISO. And also look at the far end. You look at the Mark 1, it literally tops out at 6400. So obviously the newer camera can go up to much higher ISO, for instance. The OM1 can go up to 12,800 before you start to do digital push, which is all these triangles basically. So it's quite interesting that in terms of the amount of data that it can capture or light can capture has jumped about 3 stops in this particular case, and but in terms of dynamic range, it's very linear how the Olympus or OM system sensors are, because if I show you other Micro Four Thirds sensor in just a minute compared to Lumix, for instance, it's a very different behavior altogether, especially from those with dual gain processors, because they look very weird. So let's have a look at another camera, for instance, and let's go to now Mark II, the EM1 Mark II now, and that is interesting to me because it's actually got better result compared to the latest and the greatest.
Is it? It looks about the same to me, Jimmy.
Right. Okay.
Is it
Let's switch it
better?
off. Well, in terms of dynamic range, it's a tiny bit better.
So what's the blue? So what's the blue line?
The blue is the OM1 Mark II, the stack sensor.
Okay, and the black line is
the black line is the EM1 Mark II.
I've heard some talk that stacked sensors are designed for faster readout speed, which can compromise dynamic range. If you want to go down that particular rabbit hole, you just go and have a look at DP review, because there'll be lots of people jumping up and down about that. But that does seem to be a technical byproduct of stacked sensor design in some instances or circumstances. Faster readouts may affect dynamic range.
Yes.
But it may not, and it may not be much. But it seems to me, again, that it's interesting that difference is there. Doesn't seem a lot, but it's interesting.
It is. I mean, but how I remember when I first got into Micro Four Third, my very first professional Micro Four Third camera was the EM1 Mark II, and even to this date, I still look at those files that I captured all those years ago. I still think they look really good to me, and there is absolutely no difference compared to the latest stack sensor from OM3 and the OM1 Mark II, which shows in some way in that this chart gives me, and in terms of dynamic range, it is actually still holds up very, very well all those years. In fact, if this is how it's been measured, it's got slightly better results compared to the latest sensor.
I think this particular site's results suggest that larger sensors, large format sensors, do offer more dynamic range because of the larger photo
Yeah.
size. But if you're just comparing Micro Four Thirds, I would say, yeah, the peak has already happened. But is it really a priority for people these days? I don't know. Maybe people feel they've got enough dynamic range, they want more speed, or maybe the
Mm.
camera makers think, oh, we can't increase the dynamic range. Let's distract people and do something else. Let's make it faster.
Yep. Well, speaking of speed, let's jump in and put a very fast cameras before the OM era, which is the EM1X. That was supposed to be the fastest Olympus cameras ever produced. So now we bring out the the EM1X sensor, and actually you can see it's got very, very similar behavior. If I switch out the EM1 Mark II now, can you see it almost line up exactly the same as the OM1 Mark II in terms of
Oh,
dynamic range?
interesting.
Yeah, so obviously I'm not an engineer when it comes to sensors, and does that mean that if you put in a much faster sensor, stack or non-stack, you're gonna have to sacrifice
Or
something when it comes to dynamic range?
or just to broaden out a bit, maybe it means that faster readout speeds, however they're achieved, could
Yeah,
impact dynamic range. Could. Whether they
yeah,
will or not, I don't know. But I guess the other question is how
mm,
much how much dynamic range do you need,
yeah.
and is a lot of this quite academic? Because
It,
if you have got 10 stops of dynamic range, it's quite
yeah.
difficult to crush that into a single image without using some complicated masking or shadow recovery or whatever else.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we just being nerdier here. I always say dynamic range was never really a problem for me, even when using Michael Four Third
Yeah.
for my use, and I have shot a lot of high contrast situations, and I never really complain about it. Obviously, you have to be a little bit more careful about highlights and shadows, and but in reality, in real life situations, the 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 actual differences is not actually that significant. And like I said already, many of you been follow this channel long enough, or even this podcast. Many of you know that I now shoot full frame, APS-C, and Micro Four Thirds. So I have extensive experience in working experience in all these three formats on a day-to-day basis, and the differences between them is insignificant, even though the chart may show you very different results. We'll come on to that in a minute. So are we having fun yet? Not too
No.
confused. Not too confusing.
Possibly.
Right. So again, let's have a look at another Olympus sensors, because now we're looking at the flagship ones, because we're looking OM1 series and the EM1 series, which are the flagship sensors in the lineup. I'd like to look at some of the cheaper ones from the Olympus camp. So let's look at the next one down, the EM5, for instance, the EM5 Mark 1. Let's have a look at the older one to see how whether it's better or worse compared to the latest stack sensor. Ah, there you go. Look at
It's
that.
the same.
Right. Again, but you can see that the lower ISO range between 200 to let's see, look at the dots here, 200 to 400, is roughly
I
so it's slightly worse than the OM1
I
Mark II.
yeah, I think within the bounds of technical measurement, I'm not
Yeah,
sure that is significant. Depends on how many samples they took.
yeah.
But what's the scale on that? Does it go from 8 to 10 stops, or does it go from 9 to 10 stops? On
200,
the
251. I
scale on
think
the left.
the scale on the left,
So I
0
can
to
see
4,
10. It must be
10,
10 down to 8.
10 down, 10 down to well, no,
No,
yes,
what I
10
mean
down
is
to 8. Yes, 10,
Yeah,
10, 10
so
to 8.
so
Yes, yes,
I
that's
think
right.
you're seeing the difference between just under 10
Yep.
to just over 9. So it is noticeable perhaps, but
Yes.
perhaps we should talk about what we expect from dynamic range as well at some point. But it's
Yep.
interesting. I mean, I think as well you have to bear in mind that if you compare it with an older sensor,
Yeah.
that's a sensor they no longer developed.
No.
So if they'd carried on making that sensor, maybe the results would look different today.
Yep.
But it is interesting that in that sense at least, sensors haven't really moved on a very long way.
No. No. And now, for those who know me, I always love the EM5 Mark II. So let's have a look at the EM1, the EM5, sorry, EM5 Mark II to see what it looks like. Again, compared to the EM5, it's virtually identical. And what about EM5 Mark III? It's virtually the same. So what does it tell us then? By the looks of it, like despite what Olympus claim, even way before that they changed over to OM, and we have practically the same sensors, in terms of behavior and
In
also
that
dynamic
respect,
range
yeah, yeah,
across all cameras, whether you pay for the entry level cameras or the flagship EM1 series cameras. Just out of curiosity, let's go into EM10, and that will be the cheapest sensor you can get. The Mark IV, which is 20 megapixels. Just to be fair, they're all 20 megapixels. You see, that's the difference. Not there, right?
well, they are essentially the same sensor,
Yep.
aren't they? The difference really is in terms of the readout speed, the continuous shooting, and the autofocus tech, isn't it?
Yeah.
Not necessarily image quality.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, right? And I think that it kind of brought back to the old questions about cameras. Back in the analog days, we always said that like the difference between like the flagship cameras or professional cameras to the entry level cameras, for instance, were features. Not so much about image quality because it's just a negative. Where you just throw in different negatives to get different results or different colors, and it kind of reminiscence that in terms of this, if you look at that, the sensors all capturing up roughly the same thing. It's the professional feature, like you mentioned, about how fast you can shoot, the buffer size, the autofocus system, the all the other features that you may associating with for professional use, for instance, that makes the difference, and that's what you're paying for, not necessarily the actual sensors.
I think the image quality uh, battle peaked several years ago.
Yep.
There may have been some small gains in high ISO noise, but
Yeah.
mostly all the development has shifted towards speed. And because video features are in such
Yep.
high demand towards videos, so sensor readout speed, sensor stacking, that kind of thing, which don't
Yeah.
necessarily relate directly to still image quality. So
Yeah.
you could buy a camera 5 years old, 10 years old, and get the same quality as
Yep.
you would from a new one.
Yes. And of course, Chuck L just throw in a comment here. You always say that apart from
Yeah,
features, obviously the build and the software as well. That is true. The flagship
yeah.
camera tends to be fully weather sealed, got a more rugged construction compared to the plastic fantastic in the lower range.
Yeah, I'm just slightly confused by the latest comment from Anthony. Oh,
Anthony,
I see. Yeah, yeah.
right. Let me just throw that up. I'm just gonna shrink
The
it down a little
OM
bit so I
systems
can.
introduce an all new 24 megapixel. There isn't a 24 megapixel stacked sensor
Yeah.
around. Panasonic's got the 25 megapixel unstacked sensor.
Yeah.
Um, so it would have to be a new sensor.
Don't
So
worry, we're
it's
gonna
whether
come on to Panasonic in a minute,
okay.
so you'll see all
All
you'll see
right.
all of
Um,
that.
just to come back to something, just to kind of raise awareness of this, when people talk about wanting the maximum dynamic range, what do we actually mean? Because I find usually if I run out of the dynamic range, it's going to be in the highlights.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
I've found from lots and lots and lots of testing
Mm.
that all cameras are about the same in this respect. You can get back maybe one stop of highlight detail, possibly one and a half, but they're
Yep.
all very much the same. It's
Yeah.
in the shadow recovery that you notice the dynamic range. But
Yes.
then to see the difference between cameras, you really have to bring up the shadows to an extent that you're probably not going to do in real life.
No, no. I mean,
So so a full frame camera might have 12 stops of dynamic range.
yes.
MFT might have 10.
Yep.
Are you ever going to, I mean, it's good to have 12, not 10, it's a bigger number, but are you ever going to need that additional shadow detail? Because I think the secret with digital cameras is you should expose
Yeah.
for the highlights.
Yes.
They're the delicate ends of the dynamic range scale. They're the things that are hard to get back. Highlight
Yes.
regions. So
Yes. Because once
expose
it's
for the
crushed,
highlights.
it's just pure white, so it doesn't
It's
look
gone.
good.
It's gone.
Yeah.
The photo sites are saturated. There's no
Yep.
more. They can't capture any more photons.
Yeah.
That's it. They're blanked out. So you've got to make sure the highlights are within range. Then I think
Yeah.
you can afford to worry about the shadows.
Indeed, and also, I mean, I want to also want to highlight another an area that many people may overlook. I mean, being a professional photographer, because like I said, I shoot outdoor a lot. The When it comes to very high contrast scenario, for instance, when you, let's say I do portrait a lot, so I'm just using portrait as an example. If I place a subject in front of me and the sun is behind the subject, that means I'm shooting backlit, for instance. This is the high contrast situations. In this particular case, if you purely just rely on the camera's dynamic range to get a balanced exposure, it's impossible. You can only
Yeah.
get the background or you get the subject. There's no way between them. And when you try really to push it or pull the highlight back or push the shadow back, I'll try to balance it a little bit. What you will find is, depending on how your exposures is, you may find that some clipping and highlight, so you're going to have blotches in the background, or in some cases when you push the shadow too hard, you find that the first of all, there's color shift. You may not capture the full colors. The colors all gone weird, and also you may start to lose details. Sharpness is all gone, even though you place a focusing point in the subject. But
Yeah.
when you push it so hard, you actually will see that the details are not being there, because simply the pixel is not capturing anything at all at that kind of darkness. So in that situation, you just have to do the old school way, put it in a fill light, using a flash, using some sort of light bounce to help to bring the differences between the two extreme a lot closer to each other. Then you get a more balanced, a better photographs, and that's how you get the most out of it. And this method has been used, even today, like all the professional shoots. That's why you see rigs, people, assistants doing like, holding out artificial lights, bouncers or whatever, everything to help in that kind of scenarios. No one really, for high-end shoot form I'm talking about, no one is going to purely rely on dynamic range to rescue a shot.
Well, this is the thing. It's great to have all that additional dynamic range, but if you have got detail in your highlights and you're trying
Yeah.
to bring up the shadows, the
Yes.
more you bring up the shadows, or the more you have to, the
Yep.
harder it becomes to produce an image that looks right.
Hmm.
Because you're going to have to somehow reconcile the light and shadows with the rest of the image. It's very difficult to blend them successfully.
Yep.
And I think the other thing I'd suggest is, if you need extra dynamic range, or you think you might, just bracket.
Yeah.
Maybe plus or minus 2 stops, or you can
Yep.
shift the exposure compensation to move the whole bracket series down a bit.
Yep.
Then use Lightroom or Capture One. They both have a merge to HDR feature,
Yep.
which gives you, I think it's a 32-bit DNG file
Yep.
with all the dynamic range you need, and
Yep.
it's not some horrible HDR effect like we used to love. It looks realistic. So
Yeah.
there are ways and means around this, but it is all about lighting. If you find yourself having to reconcile an image with that much variation between the light parts and the dark parts,
Yep.
you probably need to think a bit more about how you've lit it.
Yes.
It's an emergency situation that maybe
Yes.
you'd be better off trying to avoid.
Yeah, it's very easy to fall into that trap, as I found out myself early on when I first kind of making that transition between analog to digital, because I thought, like, now I have the power of, from the computer software.
Yes.
I thought I could just ditch my
the power.
strobe, my flash guns, just purely relying on editing to get the shot back.
Yeah.
In some ways, yes, and I think that you do get a much more natural shot. as a result. But what I found over the years is that, in a lot of extreme situations, you will find that no matter how many stopper dynamic range you got, it's just never enough to rescue in those really high contrast situations.
It just doesn't look right.
No, it doesn't look right
And
at all.
also, different cameras respond differently when you bring out the shadow detail.
Yep.
So my Lumix G9 was a great camera, but if you brought the shadows up a little bit too far, they went
Yep.
magenta, and it's just horrible.
Yes.
And my EOS RP full frame center ought to be good, right? The shadows were awful, absolutely awful.
Yeah.
They got very noisy, but they just lost detail,
Yeah.
lost detail. It's as if somebody's thrown a bucket of water over them, washed all the away. It was awful. So sensors do vary
Yeah.
in their shadow detail, and I think with OM gear,
Yeah.
with OM gear, I find that you can bring out the shadows pretty well. They stay neutral, but they
Yep.
do get quite noisy.
They
So I
do.
think if you're in a situation where if you're shooting a lot of backlit subjects and you want a bright sky within range and you've got dark shadowed foreground detail, I'd just bracket and merge them later.
Yeah.
I think that would be the sensible thing to do if you can.
If you
And
can,
also,
of
and
course.
don't forget, if you've got a camera that can shoot at 40 frames a second or whatever, or 30, that's a pretty short gap between the exposures. So your subjects aren't going to move a lot.
No, that's right. And but like I said, we're gonna come into the about processing in a minute, because I'm gonna show you some
Yes. Okay.
staggering results some of the iPhone sensors as well. Because you can from the iPhone sensor, it clearly shows the dynamic range or the lack of, and also how modern processing in smartphones really changed the game in terms of how people look at pictures, because how they do the smart HDR, for instance. So let's go back to this chart here and look at another sensor. So we looked at the EM10 Mark IV. What about PenF? PenF also been a popular Olympus cameras. Also has a 20 megapixel sensor with contrast detect AF, and let's see what it looks like. And again, you can see it's not much difference there. So for a lot of people, if you're just purely looking at dynamic range, you can kind of see where we're getting at now. Whether you're getting the original EM1, or EM5 or EM10, way back in 2012, 2010, you're not going to gain that much dynamic range. You will lose the high ISO performances, because it doesn't even go that high. And but in terms of dynamic range within the range of between the base 200 up to about 6400, you are practically getting the same dynamic range between the sensors. So now we've kind of finished looking at Olympus. So let's have some fun compared to another Michael Four Third camera maker, which is Lumix. So let's have a Lumix then, and see what it looks like. Okay. Since you mentioned about G9, Rod, let's put in G9 to see what it looks like now. Okay, here we go. That's the G9.
Oh, interesting.
So again, the G9 is more or less on par with the Olympus sensor, and then it's very similar curve again.
Can you tell me? Can you tell me that ISO setting where it jumps up?
That is, well, according to the, is 16,090. I don't know. Yeah, kind of weird number there.
Right.
Oh no, hang on, no, I have gone to the wrong one here. Is it right? Yeah, it is 16,090. Yeah.
Where? What's the one just before? Where it's still
12,000,
on course?
12,800.
So I wonder if Panasonic has switched in a different gain control at that point, because that is also the point at which I don't know. I'm wondering whether that doesn't correspond to my problem with the magenta shadows, because I was doing a different.
No.
Sorry, ignore that. But
Obviously,
it's interesting.
These push will be the digital push. You can see that now, and you can see how much it lost in terms of dynamic range. Actually, no, it jumped up. Actually,
don't increase dynamic range. Yeah, so something's going on.
Something's going on, indeed. Yes.
Yeah.
And even at pole as well. If you look at the bottom bit and at ISO 100, which is the pole 100. It's got more dynamic range as well than the actual native 200.
That that is unusual because usually you would lose dynamic range
Yeah, I mean, if you look at the
with
if you look at the OM1, it's got less when it's pull.
because the photo sites would saturate sooner because you're
Yep.
effectively overexposing the sensor. So that's a curious result.
Yes, it's very weird indeed. Now, and let's jump up a little bit now. Maybe we look at the. Oh, by the way, it does also measure between mechanical shutters and electronic shutter because when you use
Yes, that's
electronic shutter,
interesting.
it's very different as well. Now, maybe we look at the electronic shutter of G9 to see what it looks like. Okay, there you go.
So
Very
that's
similar
right.
curve, but
Okay.
you do lose a
Yeah,
little bit dynamic range if you compare to it. So if
tiny bit.
very
That
tiny bit.
that's another thing that's been noted about electronic shutters that you may lose some dynamic range, but
Yes.
I haven't seen any scientific data to support that. It's just what people have noticed.
Yes.
Testers have
So
noticed.
so while we're on the older Panasonic Lumix sensor, let's have a look at the so-called the low light beast, the GX5S. You know, the 12 megapixel Micro Four Thirds sensor,
Yeah.
supposed to be the greatest in low light, and see what it looks like now. There we go.
So I think the gain with that camera is only going to be noise.
Yeah,
No real gain in dynamic range.
no. So you can see that it's actually much worse compared to both the
Well,
OM1 and the G9.
I'd say visibly worse. I wouldn't say much worse.
It's about stopped dynamic range difference in base ISO, and then it kind of got closer when it
Okay.
got to 800. You know, there's a little jump there. You know, like I can't remember what
Dual gain.
GX5S has dual gain. I know GX6 and
I
GX7
don't know.
has.
Let's see. Let's
I'm
see.
not
If you carry
entirely
on talking,
sure.
I'll look.
Yeah, because GX6, you can really see the dual gain from this chart here. So if I switch off G9 Mark II, so G9 and GX5S, and I'm keeping the OM1 Mark II as a baseline so we can compare it. Let's have a look at the GX6 now. Okay, that's interesting. The GX6, right? Okay, the GX6 got quite low dynamic range, even the lower ISO bit.
Does that correspond to your experience?
Not that I'm aware of. You know, although admittedly, I didn't shoot that much with the GX6 for stills. I do it more
How
for
about
video.
how
But
about the
GX7, I
GX?
have.
Yeah, try that.
Oh, that's more like it. That's more like it. So that's a
So
big difference compared to
I mean,
GX6 and GX7.
this is the thing with testing. Sometimes you get outliers which
Yep.
look suspicious, and that looks quite suspicious to me.
Yeah. But it's very interesting to see the differences there. In this particular case, the GX7, you do see the dual gain there from 3200. You can see the bump there,
Right.
and that's right from there. Let me just go back to it to switch off the GX6 so it's less confusing. So that dual gain, you can see that is right there now at AS3200. Looks like another layer has come on and is kind of boosted up again. And I think you will see the very similar result with the G9 Mark II, which is right here. I'm going to enable it now. Yep, as expected. It's very, very similar result as the GX7 when it comes to dynamic range. There's almost no difference whatsoever. Even the jump at 3200, you can see that bump there. I don't know if you can see that. The green and the black line is basically the same. So that shows that the both sensors are virtually identical when it comes to dynamic range performances. So that's no difference there. Let's see if we've got other older models that we can see. What about GF1 and all these old cameras from
You
Lumix?
your favorite, the GM1. Let's see. Let's see. That's
Oh,
probably
the
going to be all right,
GM1.
I think.
Yeah, let me just switch off the GX7 and G9 Mark II. So let's go straight to the GM1 now. And GM1, oh, look at that! That's a big difference now. Even compared to the EM5, the Olympus EM5, is not as good. I can't remember how. What was the meg? Is it 12 megapixel the GM1? I think it was 12 megapixel. I know the EM1 was, the EM5 was the original, was 12 megapixel, not 16. What about GM5? Same thing as a GM1, so there's not much difference there.
Let well, let's not forget as well that these charts measure the raw files, so it's
Yep.
not just the sensor performance; it's also the in-camera gain circuitry that
Yeah.
evolves too. So,
Yep.
so the dynamic range can often improve through better processing. It's
Yes.
not solely the sensor, but then you can't change the processor, so it amounts to the same thing, doesn't it? Really, I guess.
No, no. But you can see that some of the older Lumix sensors are noticeably worse compared to the more modern ones, which is a bit
Yeah,
shocking, judging because if you look at, let's say, using GM1 for instance, and let's compare it with the Olympus EM5, for instance. Trying to find EM5 now. So the EM5 was significantly better because it performs more in line with the 2025 or 2026 model year sensors, which is surprising given the fact that the EM5 was 13 years old. And so
but
it's
it
quite
was
quite
this.
surprising.
It was a 16 megapixel sensor, so it's the first of the modern sensors, you might say.
Yeah, I suspect so. But let's maybe look at the EM10 then. But even the EM10, look at that. It's still quite a bit better though. So Olympus has given you guys a lot of good sensors over the years, or
Well, they
the lack
certainly
of
haven't changed. Well, they haven't changed much. They haven't
hasn't
changed much
changed
for
much.
dynamic range, at least.
Maybe they kind of outdone themselves, like give you the best sensor we can get you, and then they kind of stay the best until now.
I do think that dynamic range has more or less hit a peak. I know that people are noting that the new Sony A7R6
Yeah,
shows a noticeable improvement, but that's the only camera in recent years really to improve on that. I would say that it hit a peak around maybe as long ago as 10 years ago,
yeah,
dynamic range at least, and we haven't seen much change since then. And I'm talking about all brands and all
of
sensor
course.
sizes.
Well, let's have some fun. I know you guys, especially Lumix, I know you guys always mention about GX85. And let's see what GX85 is now. Aha. Okay, that's interesting too, the GX85. And it's still not quite on par with some of the late, newer sensors. So, but, if you look at a lot of these charts, I mean, and Lumix, up until they go to the bigger, more modern sensors, like the 25 megapixel sensors, I think we can kind of all conclude that in terms of dynamic range, they weren't as good as Olympus cameras back in the days. And I'm not suggesting they can't take good pictures. I'm just saying, just being nerdy, looking at numbers, that they are about half a stop to a stop worse compared to Olympus sensors, even way back in the early days of Michael Four Thirds. But now, of course, if you look at the G9, G9 Mark II, GX7, they are more or less kind of lined up together with the OM system latest sensors, the SEC sensor in terms of dynamic range. They're more or less the same. But you see that we've got an L10 here. This is not the new L10. Don't forget, this is the
The
original
old one.
L10. And but yeah, some of these older cameras you just can't match it. These are basically tiny cameras. And what about LX100?
uh, the original L10 was not a tiny camera. That's a proper
No.
camera.
Yeah.
But I mean, I have shots from the L10, and
Yeah.
I don't think any of them show a dynamic range reduction that
Yeah.
pronounced.
Yeah. So I'm just showing you the LX100 here because LX100 Mark 1 and Mark 2 has the same sensor, and we all know that the latest L10 has the GX7 sensor. So that means that in terms of dynamic range, you can see that the if I bring up the GX7 for instance, then you can really clearly see how much it has an advance if you compare just the two of them. Where is the GX7 now? Oh my god, the text has gone all weird. Okay, there you go. So you are gaining quite a bit of performance with the latest L10 when it comes to dynamic range compared to the previous LX100 Mark 1 and Mark 2. So we're not really dissing the L10 at all, but if you're purely looking at the
Yeah,
photographic
we
performances, and I think that you can really see the jump in performance there, and you'll be quite happy with it. I'm pretty sure if you are very used to Michael Forster behavior, and the L10 would definitely give you a more modern capabilities when it comes to capturing the light in details.
It's
Um,
a shame. It's a shame that the photons to photos doesn't really have a combined noise chart that
no,
is easily understood, because what they do there is they separate read noise from. Let me just check the details. Input referred read noise. I've no idea what that is, and read noise in DNS. What's DNS? I've forgotten. So
uh,
this is a very technical website that separates its noise measurements into two
yeah,
separate things
yeah,
rather than combining them into something that we can easily compare.
yeah.
This is image quality for scientists, not so much image quality for photographers. You might be
That's
better off
right.
with might be better off with DxO, Mark.
And I'm just looking at Angela's latest comment here, which is kind of interesting. Um, I'm just going to bring it up right now. Sensors from the same manufacturer and same generation do not different. We literally just showed you that Olympus and OM system has practically the same performance through the generations.
Pretty much.
Pretty much the
And
same.
what
Yeah.
recent cameras anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, and so that's the difference there. I know overall, if you're looking at the same generation, of course, yeah, more or less the same. And but for some reasons, Olympus seems to be keeping the kind of similar performance all through the years, and that's quite surprising to see. So we are having some fun with these stuff. How about, since Olympus now OM doesn't have any alternative sensor formats that we can compare to, but let's maybe have some fun with Lumix now, because Lumix has full frame, right? So we have some of the full frame to see exactly how much better a full frame sensor
Oh,
is.
okay, yeah.
Right. Look at some of the more popular, best-selling Lumix full-frame camera, the S5, for instance, S5 Mark II. Let's have a look, see how much better it is compared to Micro Four Thirds sensors. So I'm keeping the All-in-One Mark II graph here as a baseline, because many of you have seen it already. The GX7, the G9 Mark II, the is practically the same line in terms of dynamic range. I think that what Rod was saying, that I think we've hit the peak of dynamic range in Micro Four Thirds sensors. So no matter what sort of resolutions you're talking about, stack or non-stack, they are practically the same behavior. So I'm just keeping that as a baseline. So it's just easier to look at the graph. So let's have a look at the S5 Mark II then. There's it is. Okay, so that's the full frame sensor. Why, we're supposed to be having a lot better, right? Based on the graph, it does have a little bit more dynamic range, especially in the lower ISO section. However, if you just looking at the kind of base ISO 200, which is the base ISO of Micro Four Third, the S5 Mark II 200 is not actually that much more. So it's measured at 10.38, and the OM Mark II is 9.69. So it's not even one stopper difference between them two. But the base ISO of the full frame sensor does go a lot lower. And when you go lower ISO, you do have increased dynamic range, which is now up to 11.2 stop based on this. So if you looking at the base ISO of the full frame sensor compared to the base ISO of the Micro Four Thirds sensors, the difference is huge. You talk about a couple of stops there. And but if you're purely looking at ISO to ISO, 200, 400, 800, the gain is not significant. However, this particular chart also shows another bump for the S5 Mark II. I don't know if they got dual gain again on the S5 Mark II. Maybe it has, because it's got a huge jump in here from 800, which for my I'm not a Lumix guy, by the way, but I do have a couple of Lumix cameras lying around, and so I do notice that when I shoot video, depending on what sort of setting I am, sometimes the base ISO starts at 800. That is to increase the dynamic range, because it's doing the dual gain thing. So that's what I believe is what was going on here. Correct me if I'm wrong, but let's have a look at the S1 then. S1R, which is a much higher resolution sensor, to see what it looks like as well. Oh, that's interesting, because The ISO 200, the dynamic range is almost identical to Micro Four Third, and again, it just got better when you go much lower ISO, which is about let's see what's the lowest one he can get to is ISO 100. ISO 100, you get a little bit more. Yeah, interesting to see.
Jimmy, can I just ask, have you used DxO Mark's compare tool?
No, I have not. No.
Because you know DxO Mark does test everything. They
Yes.
don't use the same test as photons to photos, but there is a comparison tool where you can pick two cameras and then view all the technical measurements from the two cameras
Yep.
in charts, and the noise measurement is a little more comprehensible and a bit more logical. So
Maybe
if anyone
we
wants
can look
to,
at the noise performance next chat about the noise.
well, maybe so, but I think DxO Mark, whether or not you prefer their testing to photons to photos, is quite different.
Yeah.
The results are at least more comprehensible and easier to relate to, especially the noise ones.
Of course. So I mean, just go back to this particular chart here. The you can see the S5 Mark II S1 is not actually that much of a difference between them two, and even though it's different resolutions. So again, I think it's just the same generational thing, and the behavior is very very similar. But what I am also curious is the differences between the APS-C sensors now, between the full frame and also the Micro Four Thirds. So let's bring out another one. So let's bring out some of the newer cameras now, shall we? Since we have OM1 there, we have the S5 Mark II. Let's go in and bring in a APS-C camera now. Which one should we get here? Let me see. Not too old. Maybe a I know which one. How about Ricoh GR? That's a new one. They haven't got GR4, so they have GR3. That's what it looks like. Oh, that's a weird. That's a weird looking chart. But if you look at it as more like a linear way, and it's kind of what we would expect. It's kind of stuck with between the Micro Four Third and full frame, but between ISO, I would say between ISO 200 to ISO 3200 is actually pretty much on par when it comes to dynamic range to full frame cameras, which is quite impressive, to say the least, if this is accurate. Maybe I'm wrong. Let's see, maybe look at Fujifilm then, and let's see if Fujifilm's got a slightly better graph to look at. And let's have a look at Fujifilm. Right, which one should we look at then? Maybe my favorite camera, the X-H2S, my current workhorse from Fujifilm. It actually behaves more like a Micro Four Thirds sensors, which is not surprising. It's a stacked sensor, so.
This is where things become complicated, though, because it depends on what we mean by dynamic range. Because as Fujifilm users are probably aware, there are expanded dynamic range modes.
Yeah.
They're not quite how they sound. Essentially, what happens is that the camera underexposes, then lifts the tone curve.
Yeah.
So what you're getting is images with extended highlight dynamic range, which is extremely useful. And straight from the camera, the shadows look good as well. It's not really more dynamic range, but you might say it's more useful because the highlights tend to be held much better than in the normal modes. So these tests usually disable any features of this sort because they're trying to level the playing field. So what you're seeing is not necessarily the results you would get in real life shooting.
And that also highlights the very point that Rod just said. The processing, the processing makes a huge difference. So this is down to the individual manufacturers to sort this out, basically, to give you the look that we see from the back of the screen after you click a shutter button, and which is actually very interesting, and how much they actually process these images from raw data and ultimately convert it into whatever you see on the EVF or the back screen. And I'm not even talking about being processed in terms of chucking the raw file into Lightroom or anything like that. It's just simply how it display, after you clicking that shutter button on the back of the screen. So that is quite interesting when it comes to that. So let me bring in another camera that I like, which is a non-stack and so APS-C sensor, which is the XM5. I'm pretty sure you guys get XM5 somewhere, or maybe the X106, since everyone loves that camera. That's what it looks like.
Everyone loves it. Nobody can buy it.
Again, there you go. It's very similar again, very similar to the H2S in terms of behavior. That is certainly very, very interesting. Okay, just 1 second. Rod, I'm gonna give you the mic for 5 minutes.
Okay.
I need to sort out, because my wife just texted me. There's a huge spider in the bathroom, so I need to sort that one out. I need to sort that out.
Can you not film it for us?
Maybe I'll take a picture. I'll show it to you guys on screen to see how big that is. Right, I'll just give you the mic,
Good luck.
Rod.
Good luck. Good luck. So yeah, the thing that worries me a little bit about dynamic range of measurements is people will point out that a full frame camera might have 12 stops to dynamic range. Micro Four Thirds might have 10. Older cameras might have 9 or 8. How much of this can you actually use, and how much of this is simply an exposure problem? Because if you expose for the highlights, which is what I like to do because they're the things that they're the most fragile part of the tonal range, dynamic range to me seems to consist mostly of how much you can bring up the shadows. So I think we have to ask ourselves how often we do that and how important it is. And I can't say I've ever conducted any tests where I've had an image which I know to have 12 stops of tonal range, where I can experiment with bringing up the shadows. It's actually quite difficult to find that in real life. The only time you can get close to that is perhaps if you're photographing a sunset and you've got things silhouetted against a very bright sky. You might have a situation where you think, I just want to bring out some details in those silhouetted objects. And then you might find that 12 stops to dynamic range is more useful than 10. You might. But then you've got to reconcile that with the rest of the picture. So how are you going to blend that exposure adjustment for your light and shadows with the rest of the shot and still have it look natural? Because very often you'll end up with something that looks like an HDR image that's just not realistic, or use a mask for your foreground subject that is too sharp edged, because masking is an art in itself. So it's not always easy to exploit that extra dynamic range, or really to find situations where you definitely need it. So I don't know if I can figure out some way of testing this in the real world. I think what I'd need to do is try to construct a setup where I've got a known difference in brightness between the bright parts and the dark parts, and just see how realistic it is to bring up the shadows and still produce an image that looks right. Or are we just chasing something? Are we just chasing something we don't need? Don't know. But dynamic range for me, it's more important. The reason I shoot RAW is that very often, if you shoot JPEGs, the straight from the camera JPEG has lost a bit in the highlights. The highlights are slightly clipped. What should have been a blue sky has just gone slightly cyan. So having a RAW file is really, really useful for that, because you can pull back around 1 stop of highlight detail, I reckon, maybe 1.5 stops. But then that, to me, I've not seen that change from one camera to another. That, to me, is the valuable part of dynamic range. Lifting the shadows, which is where I think most of the extra dynamic range is in full frame cameras. The more dynamic range you've got, I would suggest the less useful it is on a day-to-day basis. You might need it now and again, and it's good to have it, but it's not something you're going to need every day. Yeah, that's with your macro lens, Jimmy. That's probably tiny. It's tiny.
Right. Okay. Well, it does have very long legs. I give it that. And but
I have got a spider story,
really
which is
okay. Go on then.
yeah. Where when I lived with my parents, we had a spider called bent leg, and
Okay.
because one of its legs had a bow in it,
Yeah.
and I thought I won't kill it because it wouldn't be that easy. It's a big spider like yours, so I
Right.
trapped it in a jar, took it outside, and
Yeah.
2 days later it is back in the bath. So I thought, right, that's where I first saw it. So this time I'll do it properly. So I ran the taps, flushed it down the plug hole, and thought, that's it. Sorry, bent leg. That's it. You're gone. 2 days later, there
It's
it
back.
was again. Yeah. They're
It loves the
resilient
bath,
things.
isn't it?
And also what makes UK house spiders so scary is they're quite big. They're not big, compared to spiders in other countries, but
Yeah.
they're big enough. I think they're also the fastest spider
Ah.
for actual speed across a distance that there
Right.
is, at least in the UK. So not
Yeah.
only are you facing a very big spider, it's fast, and that's creepy.
Is certainly indeed.
Yeah. So Jimmy, did you release it into the wild, or did you do something more serious?
I just check it out the window, so it's just gone
Oh,
outside.
good,
Yeah,
excellent. So
I
you'll
try
see
not to I try not to kill it, but then it might come back.
you'll see it again later.
Yeah.
Those spiders are strong. They can open doors.
Yeah,
Let
at night
themselves
when we
in.
all sleep.
Yeah,
Dear me, oh dear me.
yeah,
Okay, we got one comment I just picked up, and I think
yeah,
Angela, saying that I want to see EM1X. I think we did show
yeah,
EM1X
yeah. I think
earlier,
you
but
did. Yeah.
if you're curious, I can show you EM1X once again, which is very much the same as the OM1 Mark II in terms of dynamic range, actually. EM1X, which is right here. The orange line. I'm not sure. There are too many lines now. Let me just switch off some of them first. S9 Mark II. And I'm gonna change switch off the X106. So you can see the orange line is the EM1X, which is practically the same as OM1 Mark II. Yeah, so it's good to see, right? Very good to see. Okay, now maybe we can have a look at another popular camera, or what about expensive camera, Rod? So we do some expensive cameras,
Yeah. Why not? Why not?
right? So
How
what's
expensive are you
the
gonna go?
Leica M11, right? £8,000 camera, right? £8,000 full frame sensor, right? Let's see how much better
Yeah.
that is. There we go. Okay. Again, you really can see it's not that much of a difference. Right, it might come to surprise
Well,
to many. I mean, there is a stop difference, but it's not
at
like
least,
3
yeah,
stop, 4
yeah.
stop, that kind of
No,
difference.
no,
No.
no.
But like we said earlier, because the full frame sensor can go down the ISO to quite a bit lower than the Micro Four Thirds base 200. For this particular case, the M11 can go down to ISO 63 according to the chart here, ISO 63, and you do get close to 12 stop of dynamic range. So if you compare that to the base ISO of OM1 Mark II, for instance, you got about 10 stop. So you are having a 2 stop difference in terms of dynamic range when you compare both at the lowest ISO setting, and that is huge. But if you
The
compare the like for like ISO, is not that much difference.
the difficulty is finding real world subjects
Yep.
with 10 stops of brightness difference within them.
Yep.
It can be done, but it's not that easy. Also, keep in mind though that when we're talking about dynamic range,
Yep.
if you want to see detail in the shadows, it's
Yes.
not just about the darkest tone it can reproduce, because you need to see a variation in tone in the shadows and in the highlights. So
Yes.
there's a little bit of the dynamic range you've
Yep.
got to account for there. But
Yep.
but in real life, it's quite hard to find subjects that need that
Yeah.
kind of dynamic range, unless you mess it up, which
Of
you
course.
probably should try not to do.
But what it also shows you is that and what you said was totally correct as well. But in terms of day-to-day photographs, in like a very general scene that is fairly even in terms of exposures, you're not going to see any difference between formats.
I think if the scene is within the dynamic range of the camera, and most are, you
Yeah.
won't see a difference. No,
No.
no,
So that really kind of tells a lot of, well, kind of break a lot of myth, or truth to a lot of people out there, especially who are struggling to think about what camera to buy. I mean, I guess if you are a professional, you are a enthusiast, a passionate photographer who really want to get the best of everything, and know how to use them. That's the main thing, how to use them and utilize the actual dynamic range and the features of the cameras. Practically any cameras is suitable, like whether you spend £500 or £20,000 is practically the same. You're not going to gain much of it when it comes to the ultimate image, the actual image that you produce. Only those who can or able or understand how to process them, and will be able to gain the mass advantage for having a better cameras. But in majority of the cases, I just don't think people would be able to, especially like general
it's
mum and dad, for instance, that they won't be able to actually manage to
no, no,
exploit the system.
no. And I think it's a bit like image editing software.
Yep,
So much of the emphasis on photo editing software
yep,
is fixing stuff that
yeah,
ideally you wouldn't have got wrong. So
yep,
it depends on how you shoot your photographs. But I do think
yeah,
it's rare to need that full dynamic range
yep,
in
yep,
everyday use. But it is interesting as a comparison point to see how camera sensors have changed. And
yeah,
I think we saw the biggest leap probably around 2014, somewhere around
mm-hmm,
there,
yep,
maybe
yep,
2015. If we're just looking at dynamic range, that's when things suddenly took a jump.
yes,
And I'm not
yes,
sure why, whether it's a new generation of sensors or the camera makers turning their attention to that. But I think
yeah.
since then, we've seen very little change.
That's right. And just out of curiosity, because I saw some of the earlier comments mentioning about Sony cameras, so maybe let's go and pull out a Sony cameras, because they tend to have, according to many of you, the best sensors in the world. So let's see
Well,
whether
they
that is true
make
or not.
they do make most of them.
So we have the A7 Mark V and A7R. Which one should we pull up? A7R Mark 6.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we go for that
So we've
one.
got the
A7.
A75 and A7R6.
Yeah. So let's save an. Okay, this is the A7R Mark 6.
Which one is
Uh,
green?
the green
That
is
one.
A7R Mark 6, the
Yep.
Sony.
Yep.
So it is better in terms of dynamic range, and
Yep.
again, it's only better at the lowest ISO setting. And if you're looking from 200 onward, and it's similar in terms of full frame compared to M11. But if you're now looking at now the curve, because the gap is gaining wider now. So in ISO 200, the Sony sensor does have the two-stop advantage over Michael Four Third at the 200 ISO range, and that could be, a big deal for some.
It could be, but if you need an extra two stops of shadow recovery,
Mm.
which you may depends on the
You
kind of
may.
thing you shoot.
Let's look at A7 Mark 5 then. A7 Mark 5.
Um,
Yeah,
Jimmy,
similar
in
behavior too.
response to a couple of requests,
Yep.
if I
Okay.
can modify one of the requests,
Yep.
can you put in the Hasselblad X2D
Hasselblad X
100C?
Hasselblad X2D. Right. Okay. I wasn't gonna jump into the medium format yet, but okay, let's do
Oh,
this.
really? You were saving it. Sorry.
I was
Sorry.
saving it. That's okay. No, let's do
Uh,
it now. While we're having Sony dynamic range on, since they are supposed to be the best full frame sensor, so let's
yeah.
jump into compare to a medium format now. Let's see whether X2D2, yeah,
X2D.
X2D.
X2D Mark II 100C.
There you
I
go.
think I've got that in the right order.
The orange one is.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, interesting,
Not that
right?
great.
Not that
Yeah,
great. It's
yeah.
actually pretty much on par with the A7R Mark 5, A7R Mark 6. Very,
Also,
very
the
similar.
the Hasselblad shoots 16-bit RAWs, not
Hmm.
14, I think. Yeah,
Yes, yes, but it means that the bit rate only give you smoother gradations,
yeah,
in general terms. But if you're looking at the dynamic range, how it's been capturing it is very very similar to the Sony sensor.
yeah. So I do wonder if we've hit a peak. Also, just to make a point about how dynamic range drops away at high ISOs.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I've ever taken a shot at high ISOs and
No.
thought, oh, needed more dynamic range there.
Yep.
As long as the highlights are in,
Yep.
I'm quite happy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever taken a high ISO shot and noticed a lack of dynamic range. I mean, they're noisy anyway, so there's a
Yeah.
limit
They
of
are.
how far you would push them. But yeah,
Right. While we're on the medium format now, we may as well just pull in another medium format camera, the Pentax.
oh,
I don't know how
six
many
four
people are
five,
still
yeah,
using it. Pentax
yeah.
six four
I
five.
know
I
we
think
have a
that's
couple of Pentaxians in our
yes.
audience.
So Pentax 645Z.
Yeah.
Let's have a look at it.
Oh,
It's very respectable.
right.
You know.
So this ancient medium format DSLR is
Yep.
as good as a modern Hasselblad for dynamic
Yeah.
range.
It's
There you
actually
go.
very very
See,
good.
we got to a point and it's just stayed the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And that's another medium format sensor, which is the Phase 1 IQ4 150 megapixel. Let's see how good that is then. That is a very, very expensive sensor, that is. So let's see.
Oh, the phase one. There you
Whoa, there you go. That's
go.
crazy.
Yeah,
Right, based on this is basically about 13 and a half stop dynamic range.
yeah, yeah.
Yep,
But
all the
they
way.
are actually they are bigger.
Much bigger. Yes.
They are bigger sensors
Yep,
because although they're all medium format, the
yep,
phase one sensors are very close to the old 645 format,
yep,
whereas the Hasselblad sensor is in between that and full frame. So the
yes.
Hasselblad and Fujifilm are
Mm,
like APS-C medium format. They're kind
yep,
of medium format crop. It's
yep.
confusing. It's very
It is.
confusing.
It is confusing. So let's. Okay, I'm gonna keep the Phase 1 because that seems to be the highest at the moment, so we can compare them quite well. I'm gonna switch off some of the
Yeah, I think that'd
full
be a good
frame
idea.
sensor. So I'm gonna switch off the Pentax. I'm gonna
Yeah,
switch off Sony. Where's Sony now? Sony. Oh, there you go. I'm gonna switch off this A7R Mark II. Okay, and what about Hasselblad? I'm gonna switch off Hasselblad as well. So we're gonna keeping Leica M11
yeah.
because it's expensive, and then the Phase 1 because it's the highest mark at the moment, and I'm keeping the baseline of OM1 Mark II, right? So the next one we want to have a look at is maybe we get some ancient sensor just to see how much it has improved. So I'm looking at maybe Kodak, some of the CCD sensors, the DCS 460, 760. These are all SLRs, and
Oh God, they would. Don't get me started. Don't get me started.
right, let's put one out to see how good or how bad it is. Let's see. What's that one dot?
Oh,
Okay, that's wrong.
it broke. It broke.
It broke. Right. Okay, there you go. That's another one. Oh, that's more like it. Okay, I'm gonna keeping that one now. This is the DCS Pro SLR-N. And
The Nikon version.
yeah, the Nikon version
Yeah,
basically.
yeah,
As you can see, it's pretty bad. You know, like less than 8 stop or dynamic range at best, and after that, you
yes,
literally got
yeah,
like 4 or 5 stop of dynamic range, which is not a lot. And this is
yeah.
actually, I remember those files. You know, if you shoot anything too bright, it just basically breaks apart and everything, and then the highlights all clipped, and you're not gonna see much cloud details in those pictures unless you pull back and just underexpose a shot, but then you're starting to lose the the shadow area because it's all clipped as well.
Oh, Chuck L's asking about the EOS 50D. I hardly want to look, Jimmy, because I have one and I know what it's
EOS
like.
50D, right? Okay, yeah, we
Yeah,
haven't looked at any
yeah.
Canon yet.
Does
EOS,
the chart go low enough?
EOS 50D, 50D.
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have it here. 50D, EOS 50D. Right.
Oh, it's all right. It's all
Ooh,
right.
not bad. Not bad, but it's worse than my Cool 4 Third.
Yeah, especially for noise.
Yeah,
But then,
yeah.
yeah,
But that's
yeah.
not surprising. But maybe let's get another Canon in, because this was my very first digital professional digital camera, which is the 5D. So that is the very first digital camera that I bought for my business. So the EOS 5D Mark
I think
One.
that'll be all right. I think that'll be all right.
There you
Uh,
go.
uh,
Actually, slightly
so,
worse than the 50D.
so let me ask you a question about that and all the images you took with that.
Yep. Yep.
Did you ever have to bring up the shadow details in any of the shots you took with it?
Very, very rare. You know, and let me explain that a little bit, because like I said, the 5D was my very first professional camera that I bought for my business, and before that I was shooting film, right? So my shooting style, at least at the beginning of my digital journey with the 5D, was very much like film, or how I shoot film. So I would carefully place my subject in terms of lights and shadow. I would look out for the where the light fall-offs are and everything like that, the highlight. Because I calculate everything in my brain. I didn't want to
Yeah.
do too much of post-editing work. You know, this is how I was trained to do it, right? It's only over time when I got more used to the digital editing with at the time Aperture. That's what I used to process the raw
Oh,
files.
oh,
Um,
aperture.
yeah, so I was getting more comfortable and more experience of raw editing, you know, and I'm pretty sure the same for everybody really back in back in
Yeah.
those days. The So I'm going more and more used to, oh, what is shadow, how you push shadow and how you pull highlight, because you know, I never had to do any of that, you know, in film days, right? You just process the film.
Yeah.
So over time, I got more and more experience in terms of raw editing, and I started to mess around with things. And that didn't come until 5D Mark II when I got the second camera out. So I'm going to bring that up as well. And that's the time when I started to do a lot of push and pulling into the digital file.
Right. And
So,
when
yeah,
you started doing that, is that because you could, or is
yes,
because you'd something always needed? Yeah. Well,
because I could.
this is the thing. Yeah.
Because I
Yeah.
could. Like I
Yeah.
said, you know, like if I shot the same way as I did when I was still an analog photographer, I probably wouldn't be doing the same thing that I'm doing today. And because
No.
now I have more control over the final result, together with all the AI masking, the AI whatever this and that now on software, so it's even more powerful when it comes to the final raw editing. Compared to the Aperture days, for instance, and also, I mean, there's some advancement over the noise and all the other stuff with the sensor itself. So things has allowed me to do more with the files, good or bad. That's another subject for another day. But then I think that uh, the reason we are starting to do things like pushing and pulling in the digital file is that because, like you said, because I could do that. That means I could massage the
Yeah.
files a little bit more, and that means it's a little bit more forgiving when it comes to situations. So a certain angle, for instance, that I normally wouldn't do during film days, I can do it now with digital because I could lift up certain bits of it.
So
So
would you
let's,
say?
yep, go on.
Yeah. Carry on. Carry on. No. No. No.
No, I'm going to bring
Carry
up the
on.
Mark II as well just to see what it looks like. And so I'm going to switch off 50Ds because they're a little bit confusing. I'm just going to look at Mark II now. So Mark II has a marked improvement over the original 5D. And that's not surprising because I remember the Mark II does give me a little bit better in terms of how it looks, the file. But I still have to say that the Canon early days of Canon digital cameras, the shadows are all very, very bad. You know, like if you try to lift any shadows, it's just it's not even shadow. It's just got nothing there. It's just really mushy.
With a lot of older Canons, yeah, the shadow detail was not good.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm just curious now, just for my own curiosity. I want to look at Mark III. So let's see Mark III. As expected, very similar to the Mark II. Mark IV. Mark IV is a significant jump. Yeah, it's more modern. You can see that the graph is almost similar to the latest Sony sensor, actually, which is quite surprising considering the Mark IV is about, what, 5 years old now? 6 years old? The Canon 5D Mark IV. And the dynamic range is on par with Sony's A7R Mark V or Mark 6. Oh, no, sorry. No, that's not. That is actually M11. M11,
Right.
which is the latest Leica sensor. That is surprising.
Well, like I would tell you, there's more important things than dynamic range.
Oh, they will tell you all kinds of things. So they can justify the £8,000 camera. That's cool.
You've got a lot of things on your chart already, but could you
Yeah.
look up my Nikon D7500 out of interest?
Sorry, which one was that one?
Nikon D7500.
Okay, I'm going to switch off some of the stuff first.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
I'm going to switch off Leica. And so which one? Nikon
D7500.
D7500.
Yeah.
There you go, 7500.
Oh, really? Oh, that's disappointing. No, hide it. Get rid of it. Get rid of it, Jamie.
Right.
I don't want to see that.
It's almost identical to All-in-One Mark II.
Yeah.
Oh, no,
Yeah.
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 Ah,
Because
okay, since we are Nikon, yeah.
what we always used to find in our testing lab was that the Nikon, I think this is where the processing comes
Yeah.
into the equation.
Yep.
The Nikon sensors were typically noisier,
Yeah,
but had higher dynamic range. So the Nikon processing was different
yeah,
to other camera makers that use the same sensor.
right.
So the processing style of each camera maker is quite different.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think that about your point. It's just similar to car manufacturers. A lot of them use the same engine. But just how they tune it, how they put the different
Yeah.
suspensions and different components makes the car behaves completely differently. And
Yes.
same thing with the imaging. Like a digital imaging, even though they may have the same sensor, but the processors are different. How the way they process, or the engineers they want to how they interpret the signals, the colors, and they all change and tune, and so ultimately they all look different. It's actually very interesting to see that. I'm just curious as well about D850, because D850 is almost like the golden camera from Nikon, the DSLR era. Let's see how good it is. Marginally better.
It depends on who's testing you
Yeah.
prefer, because
Yeah.
you might get different results from different sites. It might be quite different on DxO Mark
Yeah,
to
of
this
course,
site.
of course. But it's interesting. It's interesting. Not that much of a difference there. But I mean, we've been saying that all along now, since the beginning. And I think sensor technology is kind of almost peaked now when it comes to dynamic ranges. Not much difference over the years. Obviously, format plays a part, and how big the folder size or whatever. That could makes a difference there.
It also depends as well on how manufacturers quote dynamic range. So, for
Yeah.
example, I do believe that on the photons to photos side, the Z9, Nikon Z9 doesn't do terribly well.
Yeah.
But at the same time, the Nikon claims a dynamic range of 14 stops
Yeah.
for its video and its N-log mode. So it depends. It's complicated by how different manufacturers and
Yeah.
different test sites measure
Yes.
dynamic range.
And to be frank, a lot of the myth when it comes to videoing is that no matter how big the dynamic range they claim, when shooting in RAW or flat profile, it's very, very different to the end results when you're gonna get once you grade it, because when you start pushing and pulling, you are going to lose details, and trust me,
Right.
and so you're not really gaining the 13, 14 stop that they claim. Once you start processing it, you probably end up with only about 10 stop by the time you get the result that you want. The
What
only
would
way
be
to
nice-
the only way you can get that kind of really high dynamic range look from the bigger cinema rig and all the like Hollywood stuff it's down to a lot of not just about the science of the cameras, but also about how they set up the scene to even out the extremes. And a lot of the times you will find that they use big ND panels, like neutral density panels, against the subject's background to lower the intensity of the light in the background so you can see the details without blowing it. And so a lot of things been calculated carefully in the film sets. So it's not just about the dynamic range that you're capturing raw. It's about how to find a result when you start editing it. So I think that a lot of videographers, especially the the indie videographers or just wedding videographers, for instance, a lot of time you find that you're not able to capture how you see in bigger film sets. It's because we are a one-man band videographer. We shoot just with one camera with no helps of setting up the scene to even out the light exposures or even putting artificial light. Basically, it's very, very tricky to do a one camera job to get the same result that you will see on the bigger screen. As simple as that. It's just not that. So don't believe a lot about what the marketing says. I think a lot of the time it's quite misleading. When it's finally do some editing, you find out that oh my god, all the clouds are gone because they would. even in raw file you see all the cloud details, but once you start pushing it or like trying to get the contrast and things like that, you will see that you start to lose all of it.
Contrast is the devil because you can't have contrast everywhere. If you want contrast in the highlights and the midtones and the shadows, you've got to start masking, or you've got to start using shadow and highlight recovery. And they introduce a subtle masking glow that you don't always see, but you sometimes see around objects. So it's often a bit of a kludge. I'm just trying to find. Just checking something.
You know what? I just saw that. Like we just talked about the Kodak DCS Pro dynamic range here.
Yes.
I just clicked on the Olympus E1. Any of you remember the E1, the 4/3 DSLR
I had
Olympus?
One. I had one for a while. Yeah.
Look at that. It's worse than the Kodak. Oh my god, that's really bad.
I think we just have to bear in mind we're only measuring one aspect of performance.
Yeah.
Measured by a particular lab tester.
Yep.
So
but
it's not
having said
necessarily a full picture.
From that point of view, the 4/3 sensor has improved significantly over the years. If you look at the E1 compared to the OM1 Mark II.
I think so. I think
that's a massive difference.
I think what you would usually find if you get into a conversation with anyone who used the old 12 megapixel sensor a lot, they would all complain about shadow noise.
Yeah.
It's fine until you had to bring up the shadows. Then when you started doing that, heaven help you.
Right, another tiny sensor, Pentax Q. Anyone like the Q?
Oh no.
I like the Q. It's very adorable camera.
Look at that. Is it really?
Oh, okay. Look at the Q. Look at it. Look at that graph. Whoa. That is well, not the best one, but it's actually respectable for such a tiny sensor. Okay, all right. Okay, that's cool. Right. Okay, I'm gonna switch off some of the stuff. Let's look at other things here, and because there are other things that we would like to talk about. I don't know. He got another brand. His Ideal. I don't know. I haven't heard of it. Ideal 4/3. Which is similar because it sounds like 4/3 sensor, but the dynamic range is basically on par or similar to the other 4/3 things that we've been talking about. So I'm going to switch off Nikon as well. Where's Nikon D7500? I'm going to switch that off now. Okay. So do they have Z9? Oh, Z9 they do. Right, let's look at Z9, which is their flagship, the most expensive Nikon mirrorless cameras you can buy at the moment. Okay, that's interesting. That is actually very, very similar to Olympus or OM System sensor at between 200 to 400. You're practically getting the same dynamic range, not much more.
Interesting.
Yeah, very interesting.
So there is an argument going around. This is because it has a stacked sensor and an electronic shutter.
Yeah.
But you never know with these claims whether it's because somebody thought it might be true and everyone's repeating it, or whether
Yeah.
it's direct experience. You never quite know, do you?
No. So Z9 has the same sensor as Z8, so both basically the same graph again. But
It
that's
should be the
interesting
same,
because
yeah.
you know, like I don't know
But
many of you know.
but if you
Yeah, sorry.
bring up the Z7 II, which isn't
Z7 II.
stacked, you
Right.
might see a difference.
Yeah, better as we expected.
Well, I mean, this is the conventional wisdom now, but I don't know. This is why I think some people are saying that stacked sensors or electronic shutters are worse for dynamic range.
Hmm.
This is this kind of evidence.
Yeah, that's certainly very interesting. But what I noticed, though, I don't know many of you do, is that all the stacked sensor we highlighted so far, the Fujifilm X-H2S, the Z9 and Z8, and the OM1 and OM3, they all have the same line. They all fall into the same
Right.
line. Yeah, apart from
Yes.
the low ISO and the high ISO range, it seems to be bigger sensors slightly behaving slightly better. But in between 200 to 800, it's almost identical amongst all the stacked sensors. So that is
Yeah.
very interesting read though, and I think even with different formats, you would have thought that bigger format is going to behave a little bit better, but it's actually the same.
It is. It is interesting. It is
Yeah,
interesting.
but just out of another curiosity, let's have a look at the.
The other thing you have to be slightly careful of is if you have a camera with an electronic shutter and a mechanical shutter,
Yep.
which one are you testing? I know the Z9 and Z8 don't have mechanical shutters,
Yep.
but for cameras that do, you might get a different result because the sensor is read differently.
Yes. I'm just trying to find what's the current global sensor. Is that the Sony A9?
A93.
A9. Okay, they got it here as well. Let's have a look at that.
Yeah.
That would be interesting because that's global sensor.
Excuse me.
Okay. Right. There you go.
But you've got the A93 there, if you can you find the A92 and see if that's any
A92.
different?
That's
Yeah.
A92. The green is A92.
Yeah. So it's very much the same, just that the change in gain is
Yes.
a little lower down the range. Interesting. What about could you finally put up the A73 if
Alright,
you
I'm
can
gonna
find
switch
that?
up.
Because there's a long list of Sony things.
A7 Mark
3.
3. There you go. A7 III. The green.
Oh, similar again. Yeah.
Yep.
So in this instance, it doesn't look as if the global shutter has affected the dynamic range.
No, it doesn't. But for that argument, let's have a look, and I'm going to switch off the A9. So because here I can see that just for comparison, they do have say A7R Mark II. This is normal, and say the A7R Mark II electronic shutter.
Oh,
So
they're
this
both
is the same sensor,
very slightly
slightly
worse.
yeah, slightly worse. Yes.
Yeah.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yes.
It's
certainly.
also interesting. Some cameras as well, if you use the electronic shutter, I can't give you examples.
Yeah.
They will swap from 14-bit RAW to 12-bit.
Ah. Okay. That's interesting.
Just to allow the faster speeds.
Right. So the blue line is still the OM Mark II. So I actually found the OM Mark II electronic shutter as well. Let's see whether it has any difference there. It's identical.
No. There you go. That's good.
That's
Good news.
identical. Yeah. Yeah,
Good news.
that's good. That's good. So for those OM users out there, they can use electronic shutter without any penalties to dynamic range.
I wonder if it's the same for all brands. It would be because we've already compared the Z9 and the Z7 II, haven't we?
Yes.
One
Yes, we
stacked and
did.
one isn't.
Yep.
So we can't test the Z9's mechanical shutter because it doesn't have one.
Okay.
Interesting.
GX7 electronic shutter again, exactly the same. So Michael
Yeah.
Four Third electronic shutter doesn't seem to affect the dynamic range
Doesn't
at
do any
all,
harm.
which is good news. Only the largest sensor seems to have has some problem. Right. So another curious thing is for me is we discussed this before about monochrome sensors, and so monochrome sensors are supposed to have better dynamic range because it doesn't have RGB array. So let's have a look. So we have two identical camera, two identical size of sensors. The the K3. This is the K3 Pentax, and now I'm gonna throw in the K3 monochrome. See if it's better or not. Ugh. What?
Well, you see, this was my experience with the K3 monochrome. Very disappointing dynamic range.
Oh dear.
I couldn't
Right.
really explain it.
Right. So it shows it then. So quite a big drop.
Yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah.
I
That is
noticed it
strange.
particularly in the highlights. There was just no highlight recovery to be had at all.
On the other hand, though, the K3 color sensor dynamic range seems to be very good. I think it's actually better than Sony. If you kind
It's
of
pretty well. It's pretty good. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I
if
think
I
those
just throw in a
the sensors are pretty good.
A75, let's say do A75. Yeah, it's actually better than A75. Apart from the lower ISO range, which is the Sony
Yeah,
better. But once you get to about ISO
yeah.
400, it jumps up. Almost way better than Sony. That's interesting to
Could
see.
you find, Jimmy, to satisfy my curiosity,
Yeah.
the Leica Q3 monochrome versus the
Oh,
regular Q3?
yep, yep. They have it here too. Okay, like a Q3. Ah, they don't have Q3 monochrome. They do have Q2
Oh,
though. They do have Q2 though. Maybe have a cute look at Q2. So that's the
Q2
Q2.
coloring.
That's the
Yep,
color. The black line's
yep,
color. Now the
yep.
monochrome. Yeah, you can
It's
see the big
better.
difference there. Yeah, it's a lot better there.
So I
As
so I think Leica have made the monochrome sensor work,
yeah,
and Pentax somehow messed it up. Sorry, Pentax, but you blew
yeah,
it.
yeah. It's a 1.5 stop difference between color and monochrome sensors and the Q2.
And I think as well, the
Yeah,
if you're shooting in black and white, you're going to use extended dynamic range much more
yeah,
because it doesn't look so unreal. People are used to
yeah,
seeing heavily manipulated black and white, and they're
yeah.
not so much with color.
So this is the M11 color sensor,
Yep,
M11 monochrome sensor.
tiny
So
bit better. Yeah,
tiny
yeah,
bit better. Not quite. The low ISO seems to be very
yeah,
equivalent, very similar. It's only when it comes to
yeah.
ISO 300, 400,
Just a
then
little bit
it's starting to
better.
be better.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, I think the thing to remember is that the color filter array will reduce the light being captured
Yeah.
because each of those little micro filters produces the
But
light,
give
the
some
photo sight underneath it.
redeeming quality from Pentax. Let's have a look at the GR monochrome. I think I saw it earlier.
Okay.
GR. Okay. GR4 monochrome. Unfortunately, they don't have GR4 color sensors here, but let's see how good it is now. Okay.
Okay.
Hmm.
Do they have? How about the GL3 color?
GR3. Yep. This is GR3.
Better. You see.
Yeah. So Pentax.
So
Well,
they
Ricoh is Pentax,
messed,
right? So they somehow couldn't quite
messed
get
it
the
up.
monochrome sensor right.
Broke it.
That's
Broke
interesting.
it.
Yeah.
It's probably in the processing.
That's interesting.
Disappointing though.
Because all,
Disappointing.
because Leica's monochrome seems to be a little bit better than the color sensors,
Yeah.
and yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting, very interesting. Right,
Yeah.
okay, now we look at some extreme, shall we? So let's have a look at some extreme now. Maybe we'll look at some smartphones, shall we? And so we're keeping the baseline again. We're keeping the All-in-One Mark II as baseline. We have the most expensive digital sensors that on this list at least, which is the Phase 150 megapixel IQ4 sensor, which is a much
Yep.
larger medium format sensor than any of the medium format that we are talking about, like Fujifilm 100S. It's bigger. It's actually bigger. It's actually
Twice twice
more
the
or less the same
size.
size as the negative, right? The medium format negative, almost the
The
same
six
size.
four five. Not as big
Yeah,
as 6x6, unfortunately, but as big as
yeah,
six. A phase one does like to call it full frame medium format. Just have a little
yeah.
dig at all the others.
So that's interesting because yeah, you can see that it does have almost 13.5 stop dynamic range in
Yeah.
raw terms. So it's significantly higher than anything we throw at this moment in time. But that's what we said earlier. Let's have a look at the smartphone, shall we? Because like people are talking about how great these smartphones are, and then if we look at the raw data, then we can see it's completely opposite. So what we are seeing, the beautiful images we see from smartphones, are all down to processing. So they don't have the latest Apple phones, but they do have the 14 Pro Max. Let's have a look at it. So as you can see, the empty triangles, these are probably digital and digital push, because looks like
I don't know, because I think the testing process for this site is to ask for people to shoot a raw file.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure. I don't know whether the iPhone does its multi-frame composites with raws or not.
Yeah.
Not sure.
Not sure. But then again, if you look at it, the dynamic range is pretty mediocre. It's almost like behaving like a 20-year-old sensors that some of the earlier digital camera they throw on the chart here.
But what the phone is doing, it's tone mapping the brightness values so that you get a better, you get more shadow and highlight detail clearly visible than you would with a standard camera image.
Yeah, I think it really clearly shows how clever the smartphones are, and I'm not just about Apple here. I think they have some Samsung phones, so maybe get another Samsung here. A Google Pixel. That's a Google Pixel. It's even worse than Apple.
Good. I've got an Apple phone.
Even more processing speed done then. I think I saw Samsung. Let's get in Samsung and let's see. Where is it? Samsung. I thought I got Samsung Galaxy S7. Right, so it's progressively worse. So for people who've been saying that, some of the Google phones are better, technically isn't. Then Apple seems to be better in terms of the technical sensors, and but maybe processing make a difference there. So somehow Google's processing seems to be quite good. People seems to be saying that they like the.
Sorry, be right back.
Sure. Google smartphone images, and so does Samsung. Samsung smartphone images. People are also praising the quality of it, but in terms of technical dynamic range, you can see that just isn't there. Compare the Samsung to Apple iPhone 14 Pro Max is almost a 1.5 dynamic range stop difference. So it really, really shows how much processing can make the image looks like at the end of it, and so you cannot really underestimate or undermine the importance of processing these days, especially when it comes to digital age. Smartphone is really a prime example of showcasing what can be done in software, and we obviously now have the power to do it ourselves in post, no matter what sort of camera and format you use. But in terms of that kind of smartphone look, the smartphone smart HDR look that you get, like without any blown highlights and shadows and things like that, it's very hard to achieve without some sort of in-camera processing, which we currently don't have in any sort of digital cameras. Only smartphone would do that in-camera, and so this is something that we may hopefully one day will get something similar. If we can have an adjustable smart HDR function in camera, that could
dogs and postmen.
I could hear the barks there.
Could you? Sorry about that.
No, I was just talking about, just looking at the bottom 3 lines there. These are all smartphones, and the black is Apple, the green is Google, and the orange is Samsung. And I'm just saying, how important these in-camera processing in these smartphones are now, and even though they don't have dynamic range, but somehow, the final image that you see on the screen able to capture all the highlight details and the shadow details, and how much they process these photographs with a very limited sensor.
I think what you're seeing is the dynamic range is limited, but you're seeing very good kind of tone mapping to make all the tonal range visible and clear. I think what you're not going to do with these smartphone images, don't try and bring out the shadows. That's not going to end. It won't end well.
Yeah. But also at the same time, I did say that what we would like to see as a photographer at some point, hopefully, is is to have similar sort of smartphone features on our digital camera. You know, some sort of smart HDR in-camera processing, tonal mapping, and things like that. That is comparable to smartphone. At the same time, is adjustable, so you don't necessarily get the kind of same smartphone look in camera. You still want to adjust it, but at least you're capturing more details in different kind of lighting situations. That would be really cool.
So I'm just going to backtrack slightly. So I just saw in one of the comments. Let me just see how it is. Owen, just
Yep.
checked my E410. It was low. So if you want to put that on the screen, if you can find the Olympus E410.
Olympus E410. Olympus, right? Olympus E410. There we go. Yep. Which is
So
kind of
where
similar
does
to
that?
E1, right? Yeah, it's slightly better than E1.
What color are we looking at?
The black is the E410. I'm gonna switch off the green one.
Right.
So 1 second. I'm trying to find Google. Where's Google? Google. There you go. Right, I'm gonna switch it all. Okay. So the black line
So
is E410.
so here's a sensor which is supposed to have quite low dynamic range at best, a little under 8 stops. Is that correct? But while we've been talking, I have found some of my E410 raw files.
Yep.
So just out of interest, I've got an interior shot with some antique furniture in deep shadow. I mean, unedited, it's black.
Yep.
So if I just see how much I can bring this up before
Yep.
the detail starts to go, I would say I can increase exposure by around 3.5 stops.
Right.
It's a bit noisy, but I think my point is that even when you have a camera which appears to have low dynamic range by today's standards,
Yep.
we don't need this huge dynamic range to gain useful shadow recovery.
Yeah.
It takes less than we think.
Yep.
So my E410, I'd be quite happy with that dynamic range. I'd rather it been a more modern camera that I've tried
Yep.
to use for that. But then this was like 15 years ago and they weren't available.
Yeah.
But even though technically it's got less than 8 stops of dynamic range, it doesn't really get in the way. So I suppose I'm questioning just how much dynamic range we really honestly do need. And
Yeah.
you can easily get drawn in by the numbers and kind of lose touch with
Yeah.
reality in a way.
Of course, you know, like we said at the beginning of today's chat, you know, all of this are academic. It's just we're just being nerdy to see the numbers and the charts. And
Yeah,
in real life, I mean, like I also said, you know, I've used the full frame APS-C and Micro Four Third interchangeably from day to day. I really don't see a real advantage of full frame sensor or disadvantage coming from a Micro Four Third sensor in real life situations. Very rare that I will see, you know, that oh my god, you know, the full frame is way better than Micro Four Third. You know, in some cases, I mean, sometimes I bring up my 1-inch Sony RX100. You know, I can't see that either. You know, the 100 is they actually have RX100 here as well. You can see the dynamic range is actually quite a bit limited compared to the Micro Four Third sensor. So it's the same thing. You know, in real life situation, you're not going to see that much of a difference. And you still be able to pull the highlight down and push the shadow up. You can still do all kinds of stuff like that. And it just really depending on how much of that push you need to do or how much that pull you need to do at the end of the day. And that's down to, once again, you know, how much of a difference between the brightest point and the darkest point in your image, and whether you do need to keep them. And that's the question that you have to answer yourself as a photographer, because a lot of the cases is that if you want the image to look realistic, not necessarily you have to pull all the highlight down or push all the shadow up, you know, because, you know, sometimes when it's dark, you just can't see it, and you just leave it as black, right? You know, what's the point of pushing the shadow up?
Sometimes it's important for the picture. If you shot the picture to have solid black shadows, it makes no sense to try and recover them.
Yes.
And I also think a lot of this it like goes back to don't know how many of us ever spent time at a camera club, and you'd always have the judges saying
they will love this chart.
they'd have the prints up and they'll say, I'm not seeing a full range of tones in the shadows. but I think the highlights are just it's they're slaves to histograms, and not every image needs the perfect histogram. But I
No.
think it's the same thing here. But
Yeah.
I would say that the more dynamic range you've got, the harder it is to convert that into an image that looks
Yes.
right.
That's right. Yes. And also at the same time as well, another aspect of photography is some of the images that we create are more of an artistic impression. So it
Mm,
not necessarily needs to
yeah.
look exactly how we see with the human eyes, and things that if you want it to be a little bit moody, you underexpose a shot. You want to use more darkness in the tone, and at the same
Yeah.
time, we'll flip the coin to the opposite side. If you want it to be very high key, you want to overexpose a shot. You may want to actually artificially blow out some of the details, and that create that kind of effect. So don't forget that photography can vary significantly from one genre to another genre. It's very hard to say dynamic range is the ultimate weapons in photography,
Mm,
because it really varies depending on what sort of thing you're photographing, what type of photographer you are, because it can be very, very different from one to another. And also the way you process them, it also makes a difference as well. And some people may like this ultra high dynamic range photo look, kind of high, kind of ultra unrealistic HDR, that was fashionable once in a while, and some people might like that look. I'm not judging. I'm just saying, people may like that look and they just like to process it that way. So they like to pull the highlight down, push all the shadow up, and things like that. And in that case, having a better dynamic range camera may actually help you if you don't want to bracket. And but
it
at the
can
same time, yeah,
it can do, but I've done a lot of experimenting with HDR images for tutorials and that kind of thing.
yeah,
It's very hard to find a scene
yep,
where you need HDR.
yeah,
And the first part of it is capturing the full brightness range. The second part of HDR is the tone mapping stage, where you
yep,
try and make everything look realistic,
yep,
balance up the shadows and the highlights. So
yeah.
it's like a two-stage thing. But so
It
often
is.
I find that a single raw file
Yep.
has all the brightness information you need. But what the
Yeah.
HDR software can do is that
Yep.
kind of tone mapping phase. So
Mm. I,
I think
I,
HDR is very hard to get right.
it is. I think it doesn't really help that since we mentioned talking about smartphones earlier, and is that so many new or younger people, they grow up with smartphone images and they
Yeah,
just
yeah,
associate that's what a photograph looks like. So when they buy a bigger camera, when they finally got into photography, they start in this
yeah.
photograph with these cameras. It's like, oh my god, look at that! It doesn't look anything like a smartphone. I can't get the sky. I can't get the cloud. I can't get the shadow on the chin. I can't get anything.
I think I think this is the difficulty for camera makers, that smartphones are now showing us what we see with our eyes, but
Hmm.
cameras still don't do that. Cameras are still technical instruments that
Yep.
see brightness values on a scale, and they,
Yeah.
they don't compromise. So in a sense, you have to do a lot more work with the camera image to
Yep.
get it to look how we feel it looked in real life.
Yeah.
Because our
Yeah.
eyes are more like smartphones; they're not like
It
cameras.
is. No, no, and that's the trouble. But I wouldn't say trouble. That's how why we need
It's
to
something to be
really
aware of.
aware and understand the purpose of the cameras, and how we're capturing images, and how you want to present your images. I think that's the thing. Like you do want, because ultimately, the people who pick up these big cameras, that you're into photography, you're into the art of photography, you're really into image making, which is a very different thing to a snapshot from a smartphone. And that's a moment that they want to associate with what they see in their eyes. And photography is not just about that. It's about a million other things that we can
Yeah.
talk about in very different subjects altogether. But then I think the reason why we like photography so much is because the flexibility that it gives us, and how we can present images in a million
It's
different ways
it's
depending on how we process them.
how we want them to be interpreted, or how we interpret them,
Yes.
is key to this and the effect we're trying to create. but I think it's a mistake to imagine that technical accuracy is
Yep.
somehow as good as that creative presentation.
Yeah.
It's a very secondary thing, image quality. It's
Absolutely.
part of what you're trying to do, but it's not the only thing.
No. No. And this side to a screen got a comment here is quite funny because well now we have to trash all my old cameras and buy the ones about the blue lines.
Definitely, definitely. I think as well, if we asked the camera makers whether that was good advice, they would all agree.
Yeah,
Buy a new
absolutely.
camera because then you'll have more dynamic range.
Yes, that's what they always say to you guys, right? And or us, photographers. Oh, the new camera's got better dynamic range, but how much better? Now you look at the graph that we've been showing you for the whole entire 2 hours now. They're all very, very similar. You talk
Yeah,
about very minute difference, even with the latest generations compared to the 10-year-old sensors. So when they say we got better dynamic range, they only use the word better. They didn't tell you how much better.
they didn't. They don't tell you whether it's important or not.
Yeah.
So you could say my camera's got 10 stops of dynamic range. That's a little bit more than I need.
Yeah.
This one's got 12 stops. That's way more than I need. The point is what you need, because if
Yeah.
anyone who started out in film,
Yeah.
there was no dynamic range. Maybe with
No.
negative film you get some, but if
Yep.
you shot slide film, there is no exposure latitude at all. There's
No.
no opportunity to recover your shadows. Everything is in that initial exposure. But we
Yeah.
managed. We managed somehow.
And Chuck L just put up a comment here. Photography is one of the rare areas where equipment is built to last.
In some way, I think in many ways that's kind of true. I think sometimes things last a lot longer than the manufacturers expected. So I think, for example, if you're a camera maker like Nikon,
Yep.
and you think, oh, that D850 we were making 6 or 7 years ago, we hadn't realised it would be quite competitive today. That's annoying.
Yeah.
We wish it was worse, so people had to buy a new camera. So I think camera makers are probably a bit fed up that older cameras are quite good, and they still work perfectly well.
So just
That's a bit of an issue.
just out of curiosity, I just throw in the D850 now. So the
Yeah.
Blackline Z8, which is one of the later, newer Nikon
Yeah.
mirrorless cameras with similar sort of megapixels. So let's do the D850. There you go. There's not much
Very
difference
similar.
there. Not
No.
much difference
So
there at all.
if your priority, I think you might see a difference in high ISO noise, but we haven't got that chart.
No.
But in terms of image quality at regular ISOs, you're
Yep.
not gaining anything. What you're gaining
No.
with the Z9 is video capabilities, very
Yep.
fast shooting,
Yeah.
and no mechanical shutter. So
And
all the gains,
Yep.
the gains are in terms of operation and
Yeah.
certain types of photography, not
Yep.
really in terms of image quality. And I
No.
think this is where this is why there's such an interest in vintage, well, I say vintage, older digital cameras, because people think, well, these are just as good. What's happened?
Yeah. Yeah.
But
It is interesting because I think that we talked about this. I think for the last 6-7 years now,
yes,
photographically, and I don't see a major advancements when it comes to
No.
noise, like even noise and things like that. It's practically the same. I don't. Even though they say, "Oh, it's a little bit better, it's a little bit better," but I really can't see that much of a difference there. But
it's
in terms of
incremental. I think
features,
think-
they do pump in a lot of features, and they do focus more on the video side for the last 6-7 years.
I think high ISO performance has undergone a quiet revolution. So that from one model to the next, you don't notice, but 3 or 4 models later, you think, "Oh, wow, that's a lot better."
Yeah.
I remember when the Nikon D3 first came out,
Yep.
12 megapixels, full frame. You could
Yep.
shoot at ISO 6400, and the images were okay. Now we just take that for granted on a
Yeah.
much smaller sensor.
Yeah. Well, let's bring up
I
D3.
think
That's D3.
that has improved. I think higher ISO noise has improved considerably.
Yep.
But again, it's one of those situations when you had to ask yourself how often you need it.
Yeah,
You'd rather have the high ISO performance if it's available, but
yeah,
how often do you use it?
yeah.
I'm not.
Since you mentioned
I'm not
about that,
very often past. Yeah.
I think it's interesting to see that because I just put in the D3 graph here, and the D3 is the green line, and is
Okay.
in lower ISO the OM1 Mark II is better, just better, maybe half a stop better, and the
Yeah.
high ISO is practically the same, and I know the D3 is a lot older, but again, if you're really happy about the D3 images, even today, if you're still using D3, rocking it somewhere, and still doing some photography with that camera, if you buy an OM1 Mark II these days, or OM1 because it's the same sensor, OM1, OM Mark II, OM3, you will be equally happy because it's basically the same in terms
Well,
of
the
dynamic range. Yeah,
dynamic range at least. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. So
But it is only one aspect.
it's only one
The
aspect, but it's in terms of dynamic range, it's very very similar.
it
And
shows that smaller sensors are closing the performance gap, or at
yes,
least reaching a level of performance that more people will be satisfied with.
I think the blue line, like what this side tour screen mentioned, the blue line is almost like, I mean, I know throw it out as a baseline here, and but it's practically how everyone will see that this is a capable sensor, and then this is the capable
Yeah.
images that we
Yeah.
can see, and anything on the blue line or above is going to be more than enough that you would need, you ever need really as a photographer. Anything below is obviously very limited, but it's not unusable. Like I've used some older sensors and which has got worse dynamic range, and then Olympus Mark II on
I
the blue
think
line here, it's still fine.
I think if the scene you're photographing is within the camera's range, you won't see
Yep.
any difference. It's only when you really have to push the tonal range you'll start to see the cracks with an older camera.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And just trying to get one of my cameras for argument's sake is the ZFC, because ZFC is the APC sensor. It's actually very equal to the OM1 Mark II in terms of dynamic
Yeah,
range, which I do
it's a bit,
notice because when I
little
shot with
bit,
the ZFC, I do find that it's very behave very similarly.
little better at low ISOs, you might say,
Yeah.
or is it the same? Little better.
Up.
I think
Yeah.
these differences are very small, and I think you have to allow for a certain amount of experimental error, as in
Yep.
any kind of laboratory testing.
Yep.
Will always be some experimental error and some variance in the
Yes.
results. So you can't attach too much significance to a
No.
small difference unless you see it repeated.
Yep. That's right. So I think that's probably. Oh, let's go what RX 105, which I also have. Yeah, X1. There you go.
So all
So
your
it's
favourite cameras this week, Jimmy.
I know all my cameras here. That's good. So like the cameras here, RX 105, and let's go to Mark 7 as well to see if it's better. Then it's actually worse. That's interesting to see. But anyway, the RX 100, it's got worse dynamic range, but like I said earlier, I shot with the RX 100 a lot, and it's a perfectly capable little camera, and I don't see any major downside of photographing that in a day-to-day basis. The only, I would say, challenge when I have that camera is when the situations is very extreme, like we talked about throughout the entire chat today, is when the situation is very very extreme. If you don't use fill lights or artificial light to lit up the subject in backlit situations, then that's when you really struggle to recover anything. And
Right.
but overall, I would say that most photographers would be very very happy with the performance from the RX 100. That you're not going to make much difference there. Through the
Well,
generations, for those who are curious, like I said, the Mark 5 is here, the Mark 7, which is the latest one, is practically the same. There's no difference there.
what I'm going to have to try and figure out is a test where I can compare one of my
Yep,
oldest cameras with one of my most recent and
yep,
see what the practical difference is. That
yep.
would be interesting.
Right, I just throw in another two cameras on the graph here, just before we close today's chat. The RX 100R, the full frame compact camera, and compared to the Mark II, not the Mark III, not much of difference there, and which are supposedly very very good, but I don't see actually compared to the Micro Four Thirds sensors. Again, it's not actually that much of a difference there, especially the Mark One, which is full frame, compared to the latest generation of the Micro Four Thirds sensor, is really not that much of a difference there.
There you go. Dynamic range has hit a peak.
Yeah, we're not going to see much difference there now. ZV1,
No, we're not. No.
Same as the RX100. I think that's probably it. Oh, maybe have a look at the NX1, Samsung NX1. Okay, that's a little bit below the Micro Four Third. Oh, someone did ask about Sigma. Right, I think, was it Chuck or this side to a screen asked about Sigma. They don't have the latest Sigma camera. They do have the FP and the FPL. Which one is the higher resolution one? The FPL? Was it the FPL got higher resolution?
I don't know. But they probably weren't having any of the Foveon sensors because their raw files are very different.
Yeah. But the dynamic range is quite good. Yeah.
It's
actually surprisingly good. The FP and FPL.
But that's a regular Bayer sensor. That's not Foveon.
Yeah.
So you should probably expect it to be similar.
Yep. That's interesting. All right, I think I remember this side to a screen. I think your favorite camera, MX1. Let's have a look. Ooh, look at that. Right. Okay.
We can't get through an episode without the MX1, can we?
No.
No.
Right. Let's see then. I think that's probably it. We talked about literally all the cameras here. The GX9.
Yeah.
Very similar to all the others. You know, like you say now, I've been clicking a lot of lines here. If we're clicking on it, you can see that, apart from this one, they're all roughly, the same. Like they're kind of hovering between that big section there. That the difference between them, between formats even, some of them are full frame. You really can't see much difference there. And that really tells us one big story or myth that the manufacturers are not telling us. Is that they're all the same. At least from a dynamic range point of view.
Pretty much. Yeah. I think bigger sensors are better, but it's whether you need the extra or not. That's the question we haven't quite answered, I think.
Yeah.
How much dynamic range do you need?
And if you're that nerdy or that critical about dynamic range, you can really spend about 50 grand on that phase 1 sensor, which will give you the 13.5 stop.
Yeah.
Yeah. That will give you all the dynamic range you want.
Have a look at the Phase 1 XT. They're rather nice cameras. They're like the modern equivalent of the old technical camera. They're not very big.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they also do exposure building for long exposures, Jimmy. A bit like the OM System Live ND.
Oh.
But even more so. They can run for minutes or hours. And you stop when you've had enough. So they are great for long exposures. But you're going to have to set aside around 150 grand, sadly.
There you go. Anyone got 150 grand lying around?
Yeah. Perhaps if we club together and share one.
Okay. Right. I think we have a lot of fun today talking about this. I certainly have a lot of fun looking at this chat, even though they don't mean anything, and but we had a little bit of fun. When I say they don't mean anything, I'm just talking about photographically, because as a photographer, you and I, know how to process a photo. You and I also understand, if you do work with different formats, would know, like we talked about already, they don't look that much different between one camera to another, one format to another. Yeah.
I think what we noticed from that is that somewhere around 15 years ago, there was a big jump in sensor performance. And ever since then, dynamic range at least has stayed pretty much as it was.
Yeah. So for those who are worried about dynamic range, and at least dynamic range of cameras, thinking that, I've only got small sensors. If your camera is made in the last 5 to 6 years, or if you've got any Micro Four Thirds cameras like we already demonstrated, you shouldn't worry about that at all, because they are more or less in line with any modern 2025 2026 model year cameras, because you're not gaining or losing that much compared to the bigger sensors, and you may lose half a stop. maybe a stop, you know.
I think you are losing maybe up to a couple of stops with the best full frame sensors, but it's a question
Yeah,
of how much you need. But I also think that
yeah,
it's happened across the formats too. That with APS-C and full frame, they hit a
yep,
point and they've stayed there.
yeah. And Chuck L have a final comment here. Noise
Yeah,
performance is more important than dynamic range.
it is. We'll
Yep.
find some figures for next time.
Yeah, maybe next time we talk about noise performance and
I
compare
think it
them.
might have to be I think it might have to be DxO mark for that,
Yep, yep.
even though they do the test differently. But you can actually do comparisons.
No, it's quite hard. But then
Yeah,
again, you know, like I know noise is a big thing to many people. The It's also depending what kind of thing you're doing as well. And if you're fine art for certain commercial works, clean images obviously it presents an advantage. But at some point, you know, something like street photography, for instance, I don't think it plays such an emphasis on noise as
it's
well.
well, it's a camera tester.
Yeah,
If you're given a camera that's capable of very high ISOs,
yeah,
it becomes very difficult to find situations where you can use those higher ISOs
yeah.
uh, without getting silly about it. I mean, you can do it artificially, but you'll be in a situation where you could have just have used a wider lens aperture
Yeah.
or done it with shutter speed or whatever. You have to fake a situation to show the noise performance
Yeah.
because the times when you need ISO 25600,
Yeah.
51, what's the next one up? 51, 200, they're actually quite rare.
Mm.
And ISO 6400 is going to get you through most situations.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I have said it many times, and in fact, I may put a link in the description after today's chat. I made a video, probably about 3-4 years ago, about the practical photography between Michael Four Third and full frame. I'm not trying to compare them in technical
mm,
terms, but what I was trying to say in real life situations, that's what happened. I compare them because I did a wedding 4 years ago. My second shooter was shooting the Sony A7 III at the time, I believe, and I was using the EM1 Mark III, and then so you know, if you look at technical specifications and just purely looking at the numbers, you would say, "Oh man, the A7 is going to trump over me," and you know, you can't really compare it. But in reality, the difference is way closer than you might think. For instance, because we have to shoot and capture people in details and in different lighting situations. In particular, some of the indoor images, in particular, the differences is very minimal because first of all, because of the inherent deeper depth of field that I have in my Michael Four Thirds system, I could shoot with a 2.8 aperture all day long. So in some cases, I can even shoot with 1.2 with my pro lenses, and still have enough depth of field to cover most of the faces that I need to see. On the other hand, because the full frame sensors got much shallower depth of field, my second shooter had to stop down the lens to f5.6 and f8, and because it hasn't got enough light, he has to push the ISO way beyond that we
mm,
would normally need. And he didn't want to use flash. So he pushed the ISO to 12,800, 25,600, believe me or not. I was still shooting at ISO 3200, in some cases even 1600. That is a massive difference there. And the full frame advantage is instantly disappear, both in noise and dynamic range, because I was shooting much lower ISO. So I got better noise performance, even though I got a much smaller sensor. So in reality, in real life situations, depending what you're shooting with, you may find yourself the perfect system for the perfect job. Because in this particular case, it really highlights that having a bigger sensor, not necessarily you're better. If you need to cover all the faces, that means you need all the depth of field. That means you have to stop down the lens. You want to keep the shutter speed at a certain level to to freeze the moment. That means you have the only variable you can do is the ISO. So you have to keep pushing the ISO up to keep that settings, and that's the difference between the realized testing and actual lab testing, because you can't really see exactly what's going to
there are
happen in the day-to-day reading.
too many
Yes.
variables to reach a conclusion on one of them alone.
Yeah. So just bear that in mind, and I'm pretty sure most of you understand that aspects of it, and but many don't. So I'm just trying to highlight that for those who may not necessarily understand the differences there. Yes, technically, Micro Four Thirds is not going to be as good as the full frame sensor. That's physics. You can't avoid that. But at the same time, the real life situation can also determine whether the Micro Four Thirds is actually a better system than the full frame, or vice versa.
I think as well the key is to work out what's good enough.
Yes.
Don't just assume that better is always better. You have to decide what level of performance is enough for what you're trying to do. And chasing performance beyond that, you might start compromising on the cost and weight of your equipment.
Yeah, exactly.
You might be compromising on things you do need to get things you don't.
That's a wise word. Well, like I always said, choose the right tool for the right job, and that's it, right? And you just don't know. If you need something with lots of depth of field, a smaller sensor might actually be beneficial. In most cases, and if you need super shallow depth of field to see all the bulk of ball, of course, go for medium format and whatnot. Just big sensor. Go for big sensor, big aperture lenses, but it may also cost you a bomb. Lose like a kidney or something. Just to buy one.
Yeah, there's pros and cons to both, but the key is not to assume one will always be better than the other.
No,
because that doesn't happen.
So I guess that concludes today's chat, and I think
that's what my dog's saying.
He's coming to that time.
yeah.
He knows that it's time to end the chat on Wednesday.
To get on my nerves. Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you very much for joining us today, and hope you guys have fun listening to our nerdy geeky chat about absolutely nothing, and also look how excited she is.
Yeah, that's a bit familiar, guys. That's a bit intense.
Yeah.
All right.
So it's really great to see you guys here, and hopefully next week we're gonna be back again. Oh, next Wednesday I can't do next Wednesday. Probably have to do Thursday again. So I'm gonna put up the notification to let you guys know exactly when that is. But I'm pretty sure it's Thursday, because Wednesday I'm actually going up with Mark from the School of Photography doing a YouTube collaboration. And that video is going to be quite interesting. So hopefully you guys would stay tuned for that. And also,
I may not be able to do next Thursday, Jimmy, because the Wales and West Photography show is on.
Oh yeah, it is the Wales and West. Okay, I forgot about that. Yeah, I'm not going there this year, unfortunately. And but I will see you guys back live at some point. I'm doing something with Wex Photographic, and also Park Camera. We're running a few photo walks there. So if you stay tuned on their website and the newsletter, you may see the OM System Street Walk with me event. So that's what they're doing at the moment. And also for those who are interested in buying new gear, since we talk about gear, and I remember I do have a discount code in the description for UK and European photographers. You can head on to the OM System website, and at the moment they have a lot of great deals going, cashback, whatnot, and you can use my code for extra 10% discount. Only work for cashback though. If you have a discount code thing, you can't enter two codes, so you can use one code at a time. So unfortunately, but any cashback deals means that if you can claim the cashback, you can use my code for extra 10% plus the cashback, so you can get extra saving. So that's my treat for you guys, and helping you out a little bit in this expensive world. Right. Okay, guys, and thanks again for all your support, and we will see you all again next week. If it's work can't make it, there'll be me doing solo. If not, we're gonna come back again the week after. We may do the noise talking again. Okay, guys, I'll see you all very soon. All right. Thanks a lot. Bye for now.
Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Cheers.